out of the 10 biggest problems that chefs are experiencing here in 2025, I decided to write a book. It's not a whole lot of fluff. It's something to use as a tool. And there's all kinds of, every chapter's got some worksheets and stuff to really get some traction. But it's about time management, time strategies that actually work. Because I also recognize that for a lot of chefs, like, chef, I got this thing. No, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And that could be true. The other thing that could be true is if you don't actually make time for the things that are important to you, you'll never have time.
Welcome to another episode of Whisking It All. We're joined today by Adam Lamb. Adam, thanks for being here.
Angelo, it's so great. I love to be whisking it all away.
Well, look, it's great to have you here. I know you've been in the industry for 30 plus years. You're the podcast host of Chef Life Radio, the founder of Chef Life Coaching. I saw you've written a few books, or you got a book series. You got a lot going on. So we'll get into all that. So I like to always start by what you do today, and then I like to kind of go through the journey. So maybe to just kick things off, Sure. Tell us a bit about Chef Life Radio and a bit about Chef Life Coaching.
Yeah, I guess I would say that it all started with one question. About midway through my career, after some successes and failures, I was looking around and I started asking people, all right, so let's take two chefs given equal skill sets. Why would you follow one chef and not the other? And they kept saying, well, it's leadership. It's leadership. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't tell me anything. Like, right. I need to know their ways of being. Like, what are they doing on a day to day? How do they interact? Like, I needed to know, I wanted a roadmap to be the kind of chef and leader that I really looked up to. So, I started on this journey and, started a podcast in 2008 when I didn't even know what a podcast was. And, again, kind of flail around a little bit. And it just seems like over the last 3 to 4 years, especially after the pandemic, a lot of what I've been talking about since 2008, 2009, is now starting to become more prominent. Like this whole idea that, as an industry, we weren't very good guardians of our human capital previous to the pandemic. I mean, I remember I wrote a blog post called 551 resumes, which is like, I had the sous chef position open in South Florida and I had 500 resumes within the space of a weekend. Wow. Now you can't it's hard to get anybody to show up.
Yeah.
And so I think to a certain extent, we only have ourselves to blame. And if anybody's going to fix it, it's going to have to be us because it's our mess.
Wow. Yep. Wow. So that's, first of all, podcasting 2008, you're definitely an early adopter. You're definitely a trendsetter because, yeah.
I mean, I didn't know it. It's like, what do you mean I have to learn how to put a WordPress site together? Like what?
That's amazing though. That's amazing. Okay. And so tell me a bit about, so there's Chef Life Radio and Chef Life Coaching. So Chef Life Radio tell us more about it. It's like a weekly show. Is it a daily show? What is it?
It's a weekly show. So I work at, producing 4 shows a month, whether that's, typically it's probably about 60-40 solo episodes and guests.
Nice.
And I also produce 1 episode a month in Spanish.
Oh, nice. You speak Spanish?
I grew up in a Spanish speaking household. My dad was American and my mother was Cuban.
Oh, cool.
And I grew up in Illinois and I came home from, first grade saying, I'm not going to speak that language anymore because people make fun of me. As a young man being down on the beach in Florida, I tried to, talk to the girls and they're like, yeah, no, don't speak Spanish. I also recognize that, in most of my career, there was a Spanish speaking population that really we couldn't live without. I mean, these people were there to support us. And yet very rarely were we ever conversant enough with them in a language to talk about stuff like, where are you going? What do you want to do? Like, how can I support you? How can I make your job easier? So I use 11 Labs, which is a dubbing software. And I sent the first episode to my mother and she couldn't believe it. She thought it was actually me talking. But,
wow.
It's in my own voice. But I owe a debt of gratitude to these folks and also to my Latin heritage. And I want to speak to that.
That's cool. I love that. No, I can definitely resonate with the Latin heritage. My wife is Colombian, and I live in Miami, so
Yeah.
a lot of Cubans, a lot of a lot of
Yeah.
Latinos in general. So
Very
yeah,
dynamic culture,
so
man. I
yeah.
mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and so I learned Spanish maybe like 4 years ago, and I still make a lot of mistakes, but I can speak pretty
Sure.
fluently because of between being in South Florida and family. But it's been great.
Right.
But you're right, a lot of hospitality people do speak Spanish, so I think it's like a secret weapon, right? Like you can
Right.
actually converse and communicate and build deeper relationships. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because kitchen Spanish is not Spanish. And so, I finally landed on this thing. So Chef Life Radio is a resource for chefs, to empower them to create sustainable, thriving culinary operations. The Chef Life coaching, even though I have a couple programs where chefs can enroll themselves, really I'm working towards providing a solution for multi-unit restaurants, hotels, and resorts
Okay.
to assist them in supporting their culinary leadership in the skills that they need to effectively lead a team, but we're never given.
Got it.
Right? In culinary school, nobody teaches you how to lead. Yet at some point in every chef's career, if they're successful enough, they're expected to effectively lead, mentor, coach a team. But very rarely do we have those skill sets. Just because we're a good chef does not necessarily make us a good mentor or coach.
Correct.
Especially when we don't know what that is. And being a good chef is not the same thing as being someone who is invested in developing people.
Yeah, it's such a big difference. The analogy I always think of is like, running Whisk, running a tech company. You think of a really good sales person, and then a sales manager. And a lot of people make the mistake of, let me make my best sales leader the manager. But a lot of the time it's like your best sales leader is good at being a sales person, and they might be the top performer, and they're good, but they hate the opposite, because the opposite is like you got to care about people, and it's more emotional, and how to lead, and so a very different skill set. And so I definitely see that similarity, right? It's like you could be a good chef and from a sense of like making really good plates and working efficient, but then leading a team is a whole different. So I'm with you there. I'd love to know, and we're going to get into some of your strategies and things you've seen. But I always like to understand people's trajectory, right? Like you've been in the space in hospitality 30 plus years, I believe. And so I'd love for you to just take us back. Where did it all start? How did it start for you in the kitchen, I guess? How that journey and how did that shape you to where you are today?
So I grew up in Hammond, Indiana, which is between Gary and Chicago. My dad was a college professor, married to this Cuban woman. And, on his lunch breaks from school, he would go down to this one restaurant, the Big Wheel, and he'd have lunch and, chat up the servers and talk to Artelia White, the cook, through the window where there was actually, a wheel there.
Yeah.
Big tickets. And because I had always heard like this guy's a great teacher, he's very funny. That wasn't my experience of him. Like I was his son, he's kicking my ass.
Yeah.
So I was like, I wonder what that's like to experience him somewhere else. So I got a job washing dishes at the Big Wheel. And so I kind of like peer off the side. Well, one night, as in the middle of service, I'm walking, hating life because I'm washing dishes and pots and pans, and I got an armful of dishes. And I walk past the kitchen door, and it swung open, and it was like in slow motion. It swung open, and all of a sudden I see the steam, and there's two women in there. Artelia White, who was always very funny, a large one with a gold tooth. The other woman, thin, severe with cat eye glasses, never said a word. But in that one moment, I saw these ladies doing this choreographed dance completely wordlessly, and they were weaving in and out of one another in such a way that I thought to myself, I don't know what that is, man, but I want some. Like, and I refer to it a lot as like the dream of the dance, when everything is flowing so perfectly and everybody's in their spot and everything is happening. Like it is organic. It is metallic. It is food. It's steam. It's like there is a symphony of stuff going on in that environment, which I think for a lot of chefs really speaks to the highest art form of what it's like. It's not necessarily the dish itself, but it's an entire night of dishes, right? And nothing comes back, and everything's good. Everybody's happy, and you're looking at one another going,
wow.
What was that? What was that? That was cool.
It's like a flow state, right? A flow state in the kitchen. Everything just, that's
because
awesome.
I remember in my career, in many times, like using work as an escape, like stuff's going on at home. and looking forward to going to work, because you have to, in order to be successful, you have to be so present.
Right.
You can't think about anything else, which can sometimes be a gift. I mean, you're running away from it and, everything slows down. You get in the car and like, oh yeah, that's right. I went in the military. I worked my way up through Chicago. I made lots and lots of mistakes. Early in my career, I presented myself as somebody who knew more than what I did. But I happen to be a quick learner.
There you go.
And then I came upon that moment where I have made some critical mistakes, yet I know I want to be better. And so where do I have to go? What do I have to do? And there were a couple of times I actually took time away from the industry to actually learn to go coach, take courses, do that kind of stuff. I didn't necessarily know that I was going to come back to the industry. I thought, no, this is my path over here. But in every single sense, man, it always circled back. As I am right now, thinking to myself, I am taking, the last 30 years of my career, the things I learned, the things I failed to learn, did this thing work or not? And distilling it down into this container called the Successful Chef Leadership Bootcamp. 12 weeks for chefs. We're going to get some work done. And at the end of it, each one of you are going to be able to go out and create a thriving environment where people feel seen, heard, and valued. And you never have to look for another employee again, because everybody in that market knows that you take care of your people.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well said. And I know you've gone from chef to operator to coach. You've worn many different hats. So I imagine, you learned a ton of lessons. I'd love to know maybe what's been some of the most surprising kind of lessons that you've learned across some of these roles.
Well, I tell you, early in my career, I was convinced that I needed to be the apex predator in the punch bowl, right? I came up in the 80s and 90s. And that was, a very, very particular time in the industry. And so all of a sudden there were star chefs. All of a sudden there's Kitchen Confidential, and this whole propagation of this fantasy, the pirate ship. And I got the job done, but I had to step over a lot of bodies to do that. And what I recognize is those bodies were more important than anything else. So I think the biggest shift for me was it can't be about me. It's got to be about the we, because I've been in an environment where I chased everybody off and it's just me and another cook, man. And that ain't no fun.
That's not easy. And, I guess being able to recognize that is a skill in itself, right? People can make mistakes, but never learn from them. So the fact that you learn from it, what were you able to change, right? So what was that shift, I should say? So for people who are maybe hey, that kind of sounds like me. I do scare off staff, and there is a lot of dirt, from your past life, or things you changed to then, be a lot more collaborative, I guess.
I ended up on the island of Tortola, British Virgin Islands, in a shitty little apartment because I had just gotten fired from the best job I ever had. And I was at the tail end of a 5-year addiction to opioids after my second back surgery.
Oh, shit.
And I went to the pharmacy and I said, I'd like to get my prescription filled. And they said, oh no, here we only use those for surgery. And I thought to myself, you mean I have to fly back to Miami every month to get my prescription filled?
Oh, my God.
And I thought, no, I got to figure out another way, because after 5 years, I wasn't even sure where there was pain in my body, right? Because there's that ghost pain, the opioids. So I wrapped myself up in a blanket and sweated it out for 3 days. And then looked myself in the mirror and go I don't want to slowly die, man. I actually want to live. I want to thrive. I think that it's still possible somewhere. And from that choice, things started happening. I met my future wife, got another opportunity. But I had to do all the internal work, man. I started with men's groups, sitting in circle with other men, recognizing where my crap was. And it was only until I was willing to do my own work that anything changed. And let's face it, men in general are completely happy with the amount of pain they're in. Yeah. Your house has to be burning down, or you have to lose your loved one in order for a man to go, oh shit, I better change something.
Yeah. Pretty high threshold for pain. Yeah.
Feminine doesn't want to be in pain at all. So they're the first ones to break out their credit card to buy a book or take a course or whatever, because they recognize that that disharmony in the body will stay in the body. There's trauma and shit that I went through that spent years. So that time when I decided, no, I got to be the hard ass. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was going through a program and I had this epiphany on day 68 where I remember the exact moment where I said, no, I'm going to be a hard ass. I'm not going to be that playful, funny person anymore. It was a big moment for me because I also recognized that my only superpower was my playfulness. And it was the thing that I most missed in my life. Right? I didn't want to be the hardest. I didn't want to be like world weary and like so bitter and jaded and shit. That's a crappy way to live. Like I wanted to wake up and be surprised and delighted and like think, oh shit, I thought that, but that's wrong. Like, oh, I guess I get another choice now. Yeah. So that's when I really started appreciating where everybody else is at. And that's where I started to realize, yeah, I'm over here all the time, 24/7, man. I need to be over there with you. I want to know your heart. I want to know where you're at. Like, how can I support that? Like having real significant conversations with people because I want to know your heart, man. It's that simple.
I love that. Well, and being a chef for so many years and now being a coach, what are some of the things that you think chefs struggle with the most?
Well, one of the biggest things that I hear time and time again is this feeling of being unappreciated, which is an internal dialogue that we are the ones that perpetuate, right? Because really, how could anybody else understand what we do? Even other chefs, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're expecting someone else to actually understand that and validate it, then that means that we're looking for some type of validation.
Yeah, externally, right?
Always be chasing. Yeah. Now, that's the subtext. The other is like, and because I know this from my own career, is like, I really was not grounded in my core values. I didn't really know what I stood for other than just get a paycheck for the moment. Right. And so my experience was there were some jobs that I shouldn't have been in, right? Because I knew it was going to be bad. And I took that choice and felt trapped by it. I didn't understand that becoming self-aware and emotionally intelligent meant that, okay, I'm going to take this job and it's going to be for a year and then I'll move on. Like realizing that the choice I'm making in that moment is not one born out of being trapped, but that it's still a choice. Like everything that happened to me in my life at some level was my choice.
Right. That's interesting. The irony of it is like once you start kind of assuming responsibility for your own life, that's when you kind of take control of it. So it's a weird thing because it feels weird to like put everything on yourself. But at least for me, like I've learned that it's like once you're kind of like, all right, everything is my fault, not in a negative way, but in a like empowering way.
It's exactly empowering. Like this is not about, oh, me, right? Because I spent plenty of my time, shame and regret, which is a great story of like, to not get on with what you're supposed to be getting on with.
Right.
And it's also living in the past.
Yeah.
Because I'm reliving that same moment because I can't let it go or make peace with it. Right. So the other thing that really surprised me was just how sensitive I am, but also how sensitive other chefs are.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
It's a nurturing position. Like you are in service. I gave you a great example. I was at this facility and I was kind of on a rant in the general manager's office, hating life, hating the cooks, hating the people that came there. And she looked at me and she said, Adam, don't you see the God in what you do? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how is there any of this sanctified? And she said, look around you. Look at our society. Like we are getting siloed and separated from one another. The community is shattering. You go to the gas station, you pay at the pump. You go to the bank, you pay at the ATM. Very little of our day to day is actually person to person interaction. Yeah. And she said, what you do is a great excuse for people to come around a table and be in relationship with one another.
Very true.
And I went like, what? So I'm in service to relationship? And she said, yeah. And when I looked at like, again, same situation, just shifting my perspective, I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I should be treating it that way. That means like from that perspective, I should be, feel great that I have this opportunity. I mean, there's always shit that's wrong, but the fact again, so when you were talking about like, as soon as I took responsibility for it, like it feels so good to put the shit on someone else, like the general manager or whatever, or my dad or whatever. Yeah. But there's no power to change it in that.
Exactly.
Because I am a victim of X.
Exactly.
I would much rather come from the perspective of like my choice, but that means I can make another choice.
Exactly.
Right. And that's really the power. And so a lot of my work with chefs is about core values, about understanding the power of choice, about really making a choice. Because for me, what I did came to me so easy. I didn't think it was a thing. Right. It's just what I did. But the fact is, other people would look at that like, geez, I can't do that. But because I didn't really think it was a thing, I would go to job to job to job to job to job. And very rarely was I actually consciously choosing this. Right? To consciously choose, no, I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, 6 million jobs gone. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a really great opportunity for those 6 million people to really decide whether they want to be in this or not. And we as an industry better clean our shit up in order to make it somewhere where they want to come back, because a lot of them, suffered. It is hard on your body, man.
Yeah.
It is hard in so many ways. And we make it worse by being hard on ourselves. Like my addiction was, never the drugs or the alcohol. My addiction was to my own negative self-talk.
Wow.
Like kicking my own ass.
Right.
Where else should I be in my life? God damn it. Look what I do. Like, again, great story. Doesn't actually move anything forward.
Yeah. And, on the Whiskey and All podcast, we obviously have a lot of restaurant and hospitality people listening. And a lot of those people are chefs. And so we're always about just trying to give value. So understanding their story and give value. And so part of, I think a question that maybe some of our guests might be thinking of is any advice for chefs out there who are kind of, working up, want to make it a real career? Because I think now it's a lot better, but I feel like historically restaurants was kind of like always considered, whether it was a chef or front of house or manager, it was always kind of like the part-time job. It wasn't like a real job. You know what I mean? It was like, I'm talking like 30 years ago. Like it was,
it wasn't a career. It was just a way to make
exactly. Make some cash, but it wasn't a career, right? And now things have evolved. It's like you can actually, it could be a real career in it, and it could be lucrative. And so for people who want to, exactly. And so for people or chefs listening, right, because you obviously have so much experience in that realm, any advice, right? Like they're starting out, they're maybe working at restaurant X, restaurant Y, they're moving around a little. Any advice you can give them of how to make the most of their career? And maybe part two is how to balance that, because I imagine like family life might be tough as a chef.
This is going to be not very intuitive, but the first thing I would say to anybody who really wants to make it in the hospitality industry is to get a hobby. Now, I've heard lots of people say, but chef, you don't understand. I love this. Like I've been looking for this my entire life. The only thing I ever wanted to be was a chef. And I'm like, yeah, you definitely need to get a hobby. and here's why. Because nothing should be a single focus for satisfaction for you in your life. You're going to get a lot out of it. You're also going to put a lot into it. But if you can't find somewhere else to be creative and enjoy the process and use that as another creative outlet, then you will always be coming back to this and you'll make decisions that are not necessarily in your highest. We need to have that other thing to go to, even if it's just to chill out and move some energy through our body. The other thing I would say is create a ritual or a practice around your own self-care every day, whether that means walk outside in the grass with bare feet every morning for 5 minutes, taking a breather, certainly spending some time between work and home to recalibrate your emotional state. Because I can't tell you how many times I walked into the house and my wife was like, I don't work for you, right? Because you're doing that chef thing. I need to understand that I get to show up differently for her than I do somewhere else.
Right.
Thirdly, I would say you'll never be able to lead others until you lead yourself. And so the first book that's coming out will be coming out at the end of May.
Yeah.
The book series is called The Successful Chef. And out of the 10 biggest problems that chefs are experiencing here in 2025, I decided to write a book. It's not a whole lot of fluff. It's something to use as a tool. And there's all kinds of, every chapter's got some worksheets and stuff to really get some traction. But it's about time management, time strategies that actually work. Because I also recognize that for a lot of chefs, like, chef, I got this thing. No, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And that could be true. The other thing that could be true is if you don't actually make time for the things that are important to you, you'll never have time. Sure. Like if you can't carve out 5 minutes per employee per day to check in with them, either in a group or singly, then, you're a victim of the fire alarm. It's always survival.
Yeah.
And my work is to assist chefs to shift from surviving to thriving in their careers, because it is possible, because I did it and I know what that feels like. And it is a huge shift, man, because as soon as you start enjoying it and realizing there's power in that, it's a powerful thing. So yeah, those are the things I think that are most important. And I really like talking about career longevity.
Okay.
And that career longevity, like when I came up, if you didn't work in a restaurant on the street, you were nobody. And happened to me twice in my career, had this sous chef who I really valued. And he says to me one night during service, like, yeah, I think I'm going to put my notice in. I'm like, well, why, dude? You've been here for like 5 years. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go work in healthcare. Healthcare? What are you talking about? Healthcare?
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, I get to be home with my family by 7:00 every day. Because and I had another sous chef who I promoted to an executive chef at another place. And he says, no, I want to go back to sous chef. I'm like, why, man? He's like, my kids are 5 and 7. I want to be home to tuck them into bed every night. And I thought to myself, now there's somebody who knows their core value.
Yeah.
And shame me a little bit because those weren't the choices I was making when my kids were small. Right. But it was just another perspective to say the season of your life dictates what your non-negotiable core values are, and they will change.
Right.
And so to understand that and go like, this is what's important to me now, and either ask for what you want or make it.
Yeah.
Right. Don't be a victim of it. If you have an idea about a particular project, that means you own that project. Like, do it. Have fun.
I love that.
Be in discovery.
Well said. That's good advice. I really like what you're saying about the seasons of your life. I used to always say, even just with passions, like people, I think sometimes overthink things too much. And when I was younger, I mean, to this day, still, I'm a very curious person. I love to learn things. I'm always learning. But, even my siblings used to poke fun at me because it's like, I'd want to like learn. I'd see someone play the saxophone. I'm like, that's so cool. And like a week later, I bought the saxophone and then took lessons, but then lasted like 6 months. But then some hobbies lasted 10 years. And so I always tell people, it's like, listen, I don't have any regrets, right? Some hobbies last a lifetime, 5 years, 10 years. Some hobbies I had lasted 2 months and I laugh about it. But it's like, I'd rather just do it and figure it out than always wonder like, what if? And I think there's something in like being able to just, pull the trigger and make decisions. And I love what you said about the seasonality of, hey, at this point in my life, my kids are below 6 years old. I don't want to miss these years. So I'm going to, that's my core value. Like,
so to put it succinctly, I would say you get to define what success is.
Right.
No one else. Because you're the only one whose head is on that pillow at the end of the night.
Sure.
And you're the only one, and nobody's going to be there with you with those thoughts.
Yeah.
So to come home and feel well used, like on purpose, on point, on time, like that is a very, very powerful place to be, man. Yeah. Because there's nothing better in my mind.
It's gratifying.
Like to have a sense of purpose, to have a sense of mission. Yeah. Like I can't believe how excited I am to wake up these days.
That's awesome.
Like, don't get me wrong. I've had some hard times, but I'm just very keenly aware of sucking it up and appreciating it in the moment, because it's so easy to be so consumed with the doing that I forget being grateful, being connected, being like having this opportunity to be with you. Yeah. Like I was on calls all day for the upcoming Bootcamp, and I was being so present in the phone call that I forgot our time together. And oh my God, like feeling so bad. And like, Angela, and you're like, hey man, it's totally cool. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but my commitment was to be present for you. Right.
But it happens. Funny enough, maybe the reason I was so like nonchalant and like understanding was it happened to me, funny enough, this week. And I'm usually always on time on meetings. And the worst part was I wasn't late. It wasn't like I was stuck in traffic. I was in front of my computer, but I was just in such deep work. Right. All of a sudden I looked at an email and they're like, are you joining the call? And I was 20 minutes late. And then they left the call and I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, and it felt extra bad because I'm like, I was here, literally here, just working instead of joining the meeting. Anyway, so it happens. Don't worry about it. But
I also love that experience in writing, right? Like, to be so present to what you're actually like. I've had this experience where, I look up at the screen after an hour and a half and I think, who wrote that? Like, awesome, being the open channel to the divine. I mean, they say that, since men can't have babies, they got to create something. So, like to be open to, can't think of the guy's name right now, but he's written a bunch of series of books on, like Do the Work, Stephen Pressfield, where it's like, your job as a writer is to be present to the muse. and to be ready when she wants to use you. And
that's cool.
Like to be knocked off your ass by an idea. It's same thing happens in the kitchen, man. This thing comes to you and you're like, you try that.
That's awesome.
Like, where does that stuff come from?
Yeah.
So that's really, really juicy stuff, man.
That is.
Can't tell you, man, what a pleasure it is to be here with you.
So to our listeners, it's called The Successful Chef, right?
The Successful Chef is the series name.
The series, okay.
And The Successful Chef, time strategies that actually work.
I love that. I love things that are tactical and just practical. That's awesome. I'd love to just touch a bit on your coaching, right? Because people are listening in. They're like, okay, this guy, I can resonate with Adam. I like what he's talking about. He's lived it. I feel it. This sounds good. I'd love to maybe be coached by him, or I'd love to maybe buy his book. So we just briefly spoke about your book. So let's speak a bit about your coaching. Yeah. What does that look like? And how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. I mean, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, go to the website, cheflifecoaching.com. The thing about, again, so there's 3 fundamentals that underpin all my coaching. And one is is this idea of like the 1% way, which is becoming 1% better than yesterday. That's it. 1%. Yep. That might mean, 5 more steps today or 2 more pounds on the dumbbell, whatever it is, but being very present to our natural evolution based on this Japanese manufacturing principle called Kaizen. Small steps over time yield big results. So I call that the 1% way.
Yes.
The other thing I talk about is this idea is the narrow path. So there's the 1% way on the narrow path, which is getting rid of all distractions.
Okay.
Whether that's notifications on your phone, people in your life, whatever. There's a methodology to like clearing the way for personal growth.
Yeah.
Then the last part is 3 pillars of relationship mastery, which is mastering the relationship with yourself.
Okay.
The relationship with others.
Mm-hmm.
And your relationship with circumstance.
Interesting.
Because once you master those, you can do anything. Like at that point, it's just a detail. It's, your work is an excuse for you to pour yourself into. And so I never got it. Like the reason I wanted to get into the business was because I felt at home in a kitchen. Like I felt that sense of community. I never had this idea of, a particular type of cuisine or, I wasn't going to be Charlie Trotter or anybody like that. But I felt connected to these individuals through the crucible of intense pressure. Mm. And when I went from one job to the next job, I never stopped to mourn the team that I lost before joining another team. They talked about that in this HBO special, State of Play, where they talked about this one episode called Happiness. They talked to these ex-football players. And to a person, they're like, I don't miss the money. I don't miss the awards. I don't miss 80,000 fans screaming my name. What I miss is the team. The team. And I thought, how many times in our career do we go from one team to the other without actually stopping? And this is going to sound crazy, but to actually grieve that, like to have a process around ending that so that we can show up fully.
Yeah.
And, to show up completely present is a gift, not only to you, but to everybody around you.
Yeah. Big time. As we're getting close to wrapping up, I got to ask you, if every chef out there could hear one message from you today, what would it be?
If you feel like an imposter, if you feel like, there's no right that you should have this job, that, what am I doing thinking that I can do this? Like having doubts about your capabilities is one thing. I would encourage you to understand that if you feel like an imposter, that's where to lean in, because growth is never comfortable. So if you're uncomfortable, that should tell you, like, I feel like an imposter. What right do I have to put together a leadership boot camp for chefs? Right? I mean, all of us have those conversations all the time. And the fact is that if you're uncomfortable, you are on the right path. Just lean in. Just lean. It's just a story you tell yourself. It's just a story. And you can tell yourself any story in any moment. But I think it's really, really important for us to embrace where we're at in this moment instead of thinking about where we're going or where we should be. Right?
I love
because now you're in the future and you're not even present again.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. I love that. And so for people listening in, we're with Adam Lamb, and if you want to catch him, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can just go to his website, which is cheflifecoaching.com. He's got his own podcast. He's got his consulting practice. He's all over YouTube and other social media channels. I feel like I probably missed things, so feel free to plug anything else I missed.
Well, I just want to go back to this idea of of work-life balance. As a matter of fact, the podcast episode that came out yesterday was this idea that why don't we throw that out? Because that's a lie that we've been telling chefs for a long time, that you should have work-life balance because it's unattainable. So what if we replaced work-life balance with this idea of work-life harmony? Like that it doesn't have to be 50-50. Sometimes it's 30-70. Sometimes it's the other way, but it's a fluid process, and being able to communicate to our loved ones and our stakeholders in such a way that they know the least that they can expect from us in these times. And because here's the thing, a lot of us feel guilty, right? I'm working too much. I'm not working enough. As my friend James Shirley says, it's one thing to feel like a hero at work and a failure on the L train going home. Right. So that's, a conversation that's up to be had, because so many of us are holding ourselves in judgment because, whether it's holiday or whatever, like everybody gets, you're the chef, you're supposed to be work. There's not a single one of us on Easter Sunday that doesn't really want to be home with their family. Right.
Well said.
And to be present and just be in that flow, like be yourself, be completely present in that moment, take a break, reset, and then go be home fully present.
I love that. Now, listen, I think what you're doing is really, really special, right? It's chefs are a core part of the hospitality industry, right? And the whole world enjoys them. Like you said, it could be a engagement, a family dinner or whatever, like the get together with friends. The amount of times people go out for dinner to celebrate or just to interact or just to catch up. It's a really magical place. That's why I love hospitality. And a key component of that is the chef. And I think you're bringing to life a lot of the reality behind the scenes, which is like, it could be lonely. It could be, depressing at times. It could be stressful. It could be, all the things you mentioned. And so to even have what you're doing and people to be able to work with you and have that coaching or have that book or have your podcast episodes to listen to, I think is awesome. So that part of my goal today was to make sure people hear about you. So now they know you exist. I know you have your own network, but at least now you're going to perpetrate our network. People know about Adam Lamb and they can follow you and Chef Life Radio, Chef Life Coaching. And really, this was an awesome episode. So I really thank you for joining us today.
That. And Angelo, you got to let me know how I can support you too, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, on our end, listen, we're always trying to help restaurants with the back of house. So we're in tech, but we're passionate about taking things off their plate.
In general, with the podcast, anything. I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I want to support that. I
appreciate that. Well, we'll be in touch. And once again, everyone, you're listening to Adam Lamb. This is the Whisking It All podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Stay tall and frosty.
If you want to learn more about Whisk, head to whisk.ai and book a demo.